So we're going to go on right now. Good morning, welcome to Radioactivity. I'm Rob Loride. Well, today we're going to talk about an investigative report which ran last weekend in the Tampa Bay Times. The report found that what appears to be racial profiling is taking place in Tampa in the way that Tampa police give traffic tickets to bicyclists. According to the article, Tampa police issued a large amount of tickets, 2,500 tickets in the past 3 years, more than in Jacksonville, Miami, St. Petersburg, and Orlando combined. And even though most of Tampa's population is white, 8 of the 10 people who got ticketed for a biking infraction were black. Our guests are Alexander Zayas and Kabeel Stanley, who wrote the story for the Tampa Bay Times. And welcome to both of you. Great to see you. Thank you for coming by.
Thanks for having us.
So what type of bicycle infractions are we talking about? What were the infractions committed by these bicyclists?
So most of the infractions we found were for, there's a state law for riding your bike when it's dark out without a light. That's where a lot of the tickets came from, but there's other infractions such as riding with somebody on your handlebars. You can also get stopped for not riding close enough to the curb, which sometimes is interpreted for riding in the middle of the street. Of course, there's things like helmet law and things like that, but we didn't find too many of those type of tickets.
2,500 tickets, and what percent were given to African Americans?
80%.
80%. How many records did you guys go through?
We actually went really far back in the data. We went back to 2003 and we looked at over 10,000 bicycle tickets through the years. We found that Tampa Police Department's bike tickets actually fluctuated a lot year by year. You know, there were always hundreds, but maybe it was a few hundred and then it went over 1,000, but what was consistent the entire time was the disparity. So that disparity was an average of 79% over the years.
Is the disparity in Tampa different than other cities in the state?
We actually don't have the data to look at that. We compared Tampa's bike tickets in quantity to those in other parts of the state, and we found that the quantity of the tickets is much higher here, but we did not have the means to analyze racial disparities in the other cities' tickets.
Are Tampa police being encouraged to hand out tickets, and especially are they being encouraged to hand out bicycle tickets?
That is one thing that we found. We were able to take a look at personnel files for a lot of officers who patrol a lot of these neighborhoods that we found are being targeted. And what you see in their files are awards and memos and things like that that talk about using bike stops specifically as a crime-fighting tool. So, for instance, they might have a crime spike, and so one of the responses to that would be for them to go out and really aggressively target, use these bike stops.
So they actually are encouraged. Is there like a quota of tickets that they have to hand out, or are you getting any indication that there's a minimum number of tickets that officers have to hand out?
We have not found anything about quotas in our investigation thus far. What we have found is that the number of tickets you give is tallied along with all of the other things you do. Tampa Police Department is very much statistics driven. They look at how much work you're doing, and you're given a productivity, you're graded on your productivity. So the more tickets you give, the more productive you are, and that goes for all different kinds of enforcement.
When you get a ticket for a bicycling infraction, is it always a crime, or tell me, what's the penalty for committing these infractions?
Well, a bike ticket is about $50. And so, say for instance, if you've ever been one of those people that's been caught in maybe one of the jaywalking stings or something like that, it's not a criminal offense, but it is. We are dealing with state statutes, so it is a non-criminal traffic offense that carries a fine.
And do any of the people that you've interviewed for this series, did they have trouble paying the fine?
We have found instances where people have told us that they've gotten these bike tickets they can't pay, which ends up piling on late fees. In some instances, people haven't paid them for years and years and years, and they get sent to collections. And we're dealing with, we're talking about people who got bike tickets as kids, as well as people who got bike tickets as adults.
Well, we're talking about a series that ran in Sunday's Tampa Bay Times about what appears to be evidence that Tampa police disproportionately ticket black bicycle riders in the city of Tampa. Our phone number 813-239-9663. Our email address is dj@wmnf.org. If they are ticketing bicyclists in the black community, then is there a proportionate drop in the number of bicycle deaths with that? I mean, does it make the streets safer for the people in the black community?
When we first spoke with the Tampa Police Department, they emphasized that these stops were all about safety, or at least primarily about safety, and we actually compared crash data to these bicycle tickets. First of all, it's important to note that when we first reached out to the Tampa Police Department, they said that they did not analyze their tickets, so it's hard to envision them using these tickets as a measure of patrolling for safety, but we did, and we found that crashes happen all over the city, and these tickets are concentrating in certain areas, so we didn't find a huge correlation of more dangerous and more tickets.
So if you're riding without a light, if you're riding too far from the curb, if you've got a friend who's riding on your handlebars, and one of the other interesting infractions I found in there is that if you're not holding onto the handlebars of the bicycle, is that still a crime?
That was an interesting one.
Or still an infraction, rather?
So we did find a few instances in which police did ticket people for that, and that law was actually taken off the books in 2012. We had a senator who found it and decided to submit it for repeal because it just seemed outdated. So that is no longer a crime, and still people were ticketed for that last year.
Well, again, our phone number is 813-239-9663. Let's go to some of the specific cases that you wrote about in Sunday's Tampa Bay Times. First of all, let's talk about the case of Alfonso Lee King. We're going to hear some audio that you recorded with Alfonso King. Before we hear the audio, just who is Alfonso Lee King?
Alfonso Lee King was a 54-year-old man. Many of the people that we wrote about, and indeed, many of the people who have gotten tickets have had criminal histories. So Alfonso had just gotten out of prison a few months earlier for dealing drugs, and he didn't have other means of transportation other than this bicycle he was riding, which he says that he and his brother, who is a scrapper, actually got out of a dumpster and assembled from parts. So he's riding his bicycle, he's pulled over, and an officer actually confiscates his bicycle because he does not have a receipt to prove that it is his. The officer actually thought that it looked too expensive to be owned by him, so that officer impounded the bicycle, and the police department actually issued found property advertisements for a bicycle that had not been reported stolen, and Mr. King had to wait 3 months to retrieve his bicycle.
And because he just got out of prison, this was his only mode of transportation?
Absolutely.
Let's listen to what he told the Tampa Bay Times for their series Sunday.
And I goes on like a fool and tell them, yeah, you can search it, knowing I had done so.
Oh, that's the wrong one. All right.
That's in your pocket. Make sure you have no hands correct.
All right, we're going to cue up the right one. That was not the right soundbite, and that was my fault. Let's go and hear Alfonso Lee King.
Y'all just want to put my bicycle instead of something going on. My bicycle. And my bicycle ain't stolen. So why you gonna take my bicycle? Took my bicycle and told me to go here. You ain't right me one. You ain't search me. You know I have a gun on me now. You know that?
So they confiscate his bicycle. They assume that because he looks like he's low income, he's African American, he can't afford this bicycle that he says that he built with his brother, and the bicycle's taken away from him.
He could not, we pulled the report, we quote directly from the report in our story, and it says he could not show documentation that he purchased the bicycle, and therefore it was confiscated.
Let's talk about some of the other cases that you uncovered in your reporting, and we're talking with Alexander Zayas and Camille Stanley, staff writers at the Tampa Bay Times, about their story, how riding your bike can land you in trouble with the cops if you're black. And again, our phone number, 813-239-9663. You write about the case of a 56-year-old man who rode his bike through a stop sign while pulling a lawnmower. What happened to him?
Yes, he rode his bike through a stop sign on a street that actually dead ends in a park, so this was not a very high traffic street, and so he was pulled over, and his public defender later argued that the stop was illegal because he ended up being handcuffed. The officer did not seem to care a whole lot about the traffic offense and was instead focusing immediately on, well, who does that lawnmower belong to that you're pulling? So the cops handcuffed him while verifying that he had indeed borrowed it from a friend. Amid that stop, the officers searched him and found marijuana on him, and so he was arrested for marijuana possession, but turned out he hadn't stolen the lawnmower at all.
Another case where a woman was walking her bike home after cooking for an elderly neighbor, and she stopped.
Yeah, this was a case of a woman that we found through the ticket data, who told us that she does a lot of odd jobs for people in her neighborhood, and on this particular night, she had spent all day cleaning and cooking for an elderly neighbor who can't really get around the house. As she's leaving on her way back home, she has her bike. She had had some leftover food that she had cooked for them, so she told us that she was walking her bike down the street with a plate of fish and grits in her hand when the officer flagged her down and told her, it was dark at this time, that she had to have lights on her bike.
Even though she was walking the bike, she wasn't riding.
Yes, she told us that she was walking the bike, and we know that she was given a ticket for not having a light on her bike. This is one of those people who told us that she could not pay. In fact, she told us that she actually went back to her elderly neighbors and asked if they would consider maybe splitting the cost with her. They couldn't do so, so this woman's fines have now ballooned with late fees. I think the last time we checked, it was about $90, which for her is too much.
And again, our phone number 813-239-9663. Our email address is dj@wmnf.org. Did you talk to the Tampa Police Department? And if so, what did the Tampa Police Department tell you about these arrests?
Absolutely. So,
or at least giving out the citation.
we have spoken, had a full conversation with one member of the Tampa Police Department. This is an officer who told us that these stops were primarily about bicycle safety and bicycle theft. They say that they have handed out 1,600 bicycle lights across the city. We asked them for documentation of where they've been handing them out, and they were unable to show us that documentation. Chief Jane Castor did not sit down with us for an interview, but she did issue some statements. And in those statements, it was pretty clear that these bike stops were not necessarily just about safety or bike theft, but indeed that she said many of the people receiving citations are criminals. There are crime problems in these neighborhoods, and this is a way that officers react to that.
Talk about the neighborhoods where most of these tickets were handed out. Which neighborhoods are we talking about in Tampa?
So we found in one area of West Tampa, there were 75 tickets handed out in 1 square mile. That was probably the largest concentration of tickets we found, and this is near housing projects like the North Boulevard Homes. It's that area. We also found a very high concentration in Sulphur Springs, for example, also different pockets of East Tampa.
What happens if you commit these infractions along Bayshore Boulevard, or if you commit these infractions in Palmacia or some of the other areas that are predominantly white? Do you get the same kind of ticket?
Not much. Not much happens. We certainly found white people who are riding their bikes and are getting ticketed, but not nearly as many if you look at the numbers when it's a black person. And so when we mapped these tickets where they were being given, and what we found was a pretty clear delineations of places where in the more mixed parts of town or predominantly white parts of town, we weren't seeing these types of tickets happening. So it became very clear to us that at least as so far what we could tell from the data, these tactics aren't being used everywhere equitably across Tampa.
We found only one person was given a ticket last year on Davis Islands, and only one person was given a ticket last year on Bayshore Boulevard, and both of those were black men.
Well, again, our phone number 813-239-9663. Let's hear some more sound. We're going to go to the second sound bite in your story, and people can find these at the website tampabay.com. Let's listen to what Lloyd Brown told you, and set this up for us. Who is Lloyd Brown?
Lloyd Brown was a 63-year-old man who was riding back from the grocery store in the rain. So he's wearing a raincoat, and his raincoat is actually somewhat obscuring his back bicycle taillight. So an officer pulls him over, and once he does, he realizes that Lloyd is indeed in compliance. His raincoat was just covering his light. So the officer says, "Well, I'm glad to see you're in compliance today, sir," but he does not end this conversation. Instead, he continues to ask Lloyd, well, where are you coming from? And the questions end up evolving into, well, you know, do you have any drugs on you? Lloyd ends up consenting to a search.
All right, so we're going to hear Lloyd first, and then we're going to hear the sound, part of the sound of the actual traffic stop that the Tampa Police Department made.
So when it stopped me, they talking about, we can't be searching. And I goes on like a fool and tell them, yeah, you can search me, knowing I had done something.
And check your pocket, make sure you have no anthrax, nothing that any marijuana, crack cocaine, that's a possibility. If you take that? Yeah. Alright, you don't mind my take pockets, right? Alright, listen, because your license is too severe to so bubbling up, I might be able to find some new in my car and get it to you. You smoke crack cocaine? Let me explain something to you, okay? If you do anything wrong, your head will hit the ground very hard, okay? And you will go to the hospital before you go to jail. So in the meantime, you stand here while my officers put handcuffs on you, okay?
So they stopped Lloyd Brown, and he didn't commit the bicycle infraction, but they kept asking him questions and asked if they could search him, and then they eventually found some drugs on him. What did they find?
They found crack cocaine on him, and they told him, okay, if you do anything dumb, your head will hit the ground so hard you're going to have to go to the hospital before you go to jail.
If I'm stopped by a police officer, or anybody is stopped by the police officer, do you have to consent to a search? Do you have to say yes? Do you know what the answer to that is?
You don't automatically have to say yes. This was something that we encountered a lot in the neighborhoods, where we found people who, because of maybe a past criminal history or because just they don't know, they said that they found themselves consenting to searches, a lot of like young people, things like that. We found cases where these would spill out into court, where maybe public defenders or sometimes defense attorneys would then come back and argue the legality of certain searches, and did they have to go so far, things like that.
And in some cases, we're finding officers are not asking. We found one particular case we wrote about in which officers searched a man without consent. They later, to justify their actions, said, well, maybe he had a gun on him, and their justifications for that were he was in a high crime area and he was wearing large clothing.
Again, our phone number, 813-239-9663. Let's take some calls from listeners. We're talking about a series of investigative reports, or actually two reports in the Tampa Bay Times. There was one Sunday and there's one today. Let's go to Larry in Tampa. Larry, thanks for calling in. What's your question for our guests?
Hey, just wanted to, actually not a question, just wanted to actually make a statement. Just wanted to say thank you for doing the research, shedding some light on what's going on with our people in the city of Tampa. And just because you're bringing it to the light, I think things are going to change. Going with things with bicycle infractions, just simple things that'll lead to other things. Just want to say thank you for putting light to it, and keep up the work.
All right, Larry, thanks. Larry, do you have any friends to which this has happened by any chance?
Oh, myself. It happened to me several times living in West Tampa, in the area of Rome and Spruce. Just living in that area, it almost feels like living in Iraq. I was here,
Well, Larry, thanks a lot. Thank you. What do you think the police should do, Larry? I mean, if the police were to treat people fairly, from your perspective, what should they be doing?
There is a certain level of crime that is taking place in the community, but the old tactic of just shake them and see what falls out, you can't do that anymore. I mean, you gotta just treat people like human beings. If you can do that, then the relationship with people will get a lot better, and then we won't have these feelings fight.
All right, Larry, thanks a lot. Thank you for your call.
No problem.
All right, good to hear from you. 813-239-9663, and our email address, dj@wmnf.org. And David is in Tampa. David, what's your question for our guests?
One thing I thought was interesting was talk about bikes on the bicycle. Is that, even even during the daytime, if you only ride during the day, are you still supposed to have a light on your bike? That seems kind of weird to me.
No, the statute actually requires you to have one from sunset to sunrise, so at nighttime. We didn't put this in the story, but it was an interesting little detail. So the law says sunset to sunrise. We did find people that were ticketed before twilight. So yes, legally it was after sunset, but there was still light out on the streets. And of those people, we found about 15 people ticketed last year before twilight when it was still light out, and 14 out of those 15 people were African American.
And I thought it was interesting, I think you could follow, like, these packs of spandex-clad white people that ride their bikes all the time, and I think you would see them doing a ton of violations, running red lights and running stop signs, and, but they probably wouldn't get shaken down like these black people, So it's just kind of a travesty. I'm glad you brought it to it.
All right, David, thanks a lot. Well, what about the packs of bicyclists who ride our streets here in the Tampa Bay area? And Camille, you talked about one of the infractions being you ride too far away from the curb. I got to say that I have seen packs of almost professional riders, people that have the spandex and the helmets and the racing bikes, and they're all over the road. They're not just right next to the curb. And I wondered, if they're riding like that, is that a violation?
Well, the statute specifically is talking about if you are going to be a cyclist, because let's be clear, so bikes are a form of transportation, right? But if you're going to be a cyclist on the road and you are not going with the speed of traffic, so a lot of those people that we see in the spandex and the professional cyclists, they can keep up with cars. And around the Tampa Bay area, it's been no secret that we've been trying to make ourselves a more bike-friendly place. So the point of the statute is if you're not one of those people that's going to be keeping up with the speed and with the regular flow of traffic, then you need to be closer to the curb. And then anecdotally, I will tell you that I'm not a cyclist myself, but as we were reporting the stories, certainly we came into contact with people who do cycle either for commuting and things like that, and they would tell us that occasionally they would see maybe stings or whatnot with police officers. Maybe, hey, one Sunday morning or whatnot, everybody gets warnings and things like that. But we don't have the data to look at like how often that kind of thing is happening.
Well, we're talking with Camille Stanley, who is a staff writer at the Tampa Bay Times, and she's here with Alexander Zayas, and they have written a story about how riding your bike can land you in trouble with the cops in Tampa if you're black. Our phone number, 813-239-9663. Mark's listening in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Mark, thanks for calling in. What's your question for our guest?
Thank you, Tom. And Camille and Alexander, thank you for the story. I live in Central Florida, and I'm traveling with my work, and I'm going to be listening to the radio station on the road. But my question, Rob, I'm a culture search for my former city mining policeman, but what the policemen don't seem to do when I was on the road, they don't follow the law, which you have to have probable cause or reasonable suspicion. And suspicion, when they shake people down, when they pull somebody over just because they can, whether they're in a vehicle or on a bicycle, in this case bicycle, then they find there are no drugs. That's when they issue a ticket, and they'll find a reason to write the ticket. So that prevents them from getting in trouble. It's kind of a blocking movement. My observation, as a person who's lived in the United States and watched our society evolve and live and turn, it just looks like that when there aren't legitimate jobs, working class jobs where people can make a living wage, people resort to riding bicycles. And many of the people that are riding bikes are legitimate people that are called the working class poor. And so the police automatically live in such an antiseptic reality, where they're overreacting so much all across the country. So insulated from the reality of life on the street that we should get local police. They don't need to be shocked. I came in contact with have guns in their hands and shoot them as a rookie cop out of Miami. I'm not saying I was the best, but I just did the way I perceived the Constitution interpreted, give the person the benefit of the doubt. And I made it home alive. No stress. But, so really, basically, my interpretation is it's economic injustice and racism which leads to just arbitrarily pulling people over on their bicycles because they can. And then, like I said earlier, if they are found free of drugs, that's when we need to for the cops and ultimately for the class action lawsuit. And that's, I would ask Alexander and his partner if they would also look at this statistics of felony arrests, which is probable cause starting with a bicycle incident. That I don't know if they have those numbers. That might be interesting to see. I'm sure there is some percentage of it. I'll hang up and listen to what they would have an answer on that.
All right. Mark?
I doubt it's very high, Rob.
All right, Mark, thanks a lot. Thank you for your comments.
He brings up a very good point. So we see a partial universe when we look at bicycle tickets, because it's very true. If somebody gets pulled over on a bike stop and they're found, having committed some great serious crime, maybe the officer won't write the bike ticket. They will just arrest them for that crime. And indeed, that is what Tampa Police Chief Jane Castor says. She says, "You guys, you're just looking at tickets," and we did find that of people who were ticketed, a small minority actually were arrested for crimes, and even smaller minority were arrested for very serious crimes. We found a lot of misdemeanor pot possession or obstructing opposing arrest, trespassing. The universe that we're looking at as far as tickets does not necessarily reveal bicycle stops in which people do not receive tickets but are later arrested for more serious crimes. We did find that in some, those charges have been dismissed because of illegal searches, such as the one that I mentioned, in which officers searched somebody. Their justification was that he was in a high crime area, he was wearing large clothing. That case was dismissed.
And Dan writes this. He says, "I hope this doesn't scare anyone away from riding your bike." That's Dan's take on that. And here's somebody from the 917 area code who says, "I rode a bike for decades in New York City traffic and found roads here so dangerous that when I ride on the sidewalks and I never get a ticket. I wonder why. I'm a middle-aged white guy. I wonder if there's a coincidence." Is it illegal to ride your bike, or can you get a citation for riding your bike on the sidewalk here in Tampa Bay?
State statute does not cover that, but there tend to be some municipal codes in which you can't in some areas. So that's up to the city. That's not necessarily part of this bike statute.
I live in St. Petersburg, and I want to say that that's certainly been discussed, if it's not actually in the Muni Code, about riding your bike on the sidewalk.
Camille, as you and Alexander wrote this series, did the civil liberties groups respond, and if so, what did they say?
They did. You'll see in our story that folks like the Southern Poverty Law Center, folks like the American Civil Liberties Union have responded to our story, and they do see some concerns here with just the sheer racial disparity that we see, as well as the way these stops sometimes are carried out.
Mm-hmm. And Alexander, in today's Tampa Bay Times, Frank Reddick, the City Council Chairman, Tampa City Council Chairman, had a statement. What did he say?
Frank Reddick was shocked. He said he was embarrassed by this story. He is disheartened by the reaction of both the mayor, who has not yet issued a comment regarding these findings, and the police department, and what he really wants are answers. So he says that on Thursday at the city council meeting he plans to bring this up and hopefully set a date in which both the mayor and the chief can respond to some of these findings.
We're getting a lot of emails, and this person says in the 727 area code, "Great show, great topic." Well, thank you for that. If you have a comment, though, about the stories, something more than great show, appreciate great show, but let's see if we can get something a little bit more in depth. 813